Lakota Fund for Indigenous Peoples. Thank you.
Ampetu washte, Wanakcha washdewi imachiapi, Washitu chaje Helene Gadi, Oglala Lakota, Makoche emataha, Shumnuni elwati. Good day, everybody. My Lakota name is Wanakcha Washdewi. I'm from the Oglala Lakota Nation. My English name is Helene Gadi, and I live in a community called Lost Dog here in the Pine Ridge Reservation, and I'm really honored and happy and humbled to be asked to welcome everybody today to this virtual gathering for the New Songs Rising Initiative and bringing all of our female relatives together in reconnect, in all the work that we do. And I wanted to share a little bit. These last few months have really been an opening for myself, an opening for probably everybody here in the work that you do in helping our young women and everywhere, reconnect to our ancestral rights as Indigenous women, and helping our young women in different situations reconnect to Mother Earth, and helping healing to build strong matriarchs. And we have a lot of movements that are going on in the world. We have a lot of struggles, but through those struggles, when we build strong young relatives, they will grow up to be strong matriarchs who will raise warriors, who will raise future matriarchs who can reconnect to our cultures and our lands. Recently, I visited several different circles, in Oglala Lakota country. It's a time of ceremony, and it's a time of families and Tioshpae and communities gathering to send our prayers to the Creator, and was able to take part and support in the Ocheti Shakawi, different circles that are helping our young women reconnect to our ancestral rights. And there were Lakota elders there, our female relatives who were there to give wisdom. And we were there to teach the young people, also myself and one of my sister-in-laws. And we left the elder ladies that were there, one of them, her name was Mabel Defender. And when we left, I said, we gave words of encouragement, but these elderly lady and Tui's Faith Spotted Eagle made us feel that empowerment, and that we were uplifted, and inspired us and gave us that hope and that love, and sent us on our way. Like, we left the camp and we were like, I'm ready to take on the world, and everybody who is doing the work in the New Songs Rising Initiative, the young ladies and the women that you are working with in the work that you are doing, when you finish a program, or you finish your objectives of whatever it might be, let the people that come there leave feeling like they are ready to take on the world, that they are empowered and they are loved. And all of you here in this virtual circle, you're doing well as well, and that's how we make things happen. That's how, as Indigenous women, and as women in the world, working, helping to restore our connection with our people, with our young people, and helping to heal Unchimaka, or keep her strong, and that we always talk about honoring our mothers and our grandmothers, but mostly important to honor Unchimaka, what is, Grandmother Earth, and teaching the little steps. There's a thing called carbon footprint, and we always try our best to make that as small as we possibly can in the work that we do, and include that in anything, and recognize, how can we do that? How can we incorporate these little steps that make a big difference in our work? And so I just want to welcome everybody with a warm heart shake and, handshake, virtual. I say heart shake, because it's virtual. I can't shake your hand. But very glad, Daya Yahi, I'm glad that you're here and that everybody is doing the work and that you feel rejuvenated and that, we're in the middle of a summer, in the middle of the seasons, in a time where most of our Indigenous people in North America are going into ceremony and reconnecting, and recognizing that, and helping the young people to recognize that. And just want everybody to have a good day, and that the teachings that you take in today and the conversations that you take in today, that you have a good mind and a good heart, and everybody bring in some positive acknowledgement for that. And Wopila Tanka for allowing me to be here with you all. Thank you.
Keshi Kotanamadokia, warm greetings, and thank you, Helene, always for your beautiful and inspiring words that you shared so generously with all of us today. Thank you for that welcome. My name is Tia Oroz Peters. I'm Shiwi, and I serve as the CEO of the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. We are part of the oldest and biggest global movement for good on the planet, the Indigenous Peoples Movement. We are 530 years strong. I recognize the Wiyot Nation. That's where I'm standing. I'm at a standing desk this morning, and this is where I'm standing and greeting all of you today. This is where our organization, 7th Generation Fund, is headquartered, and I honor their ancestors, past, present, and future, and their beautiful territories of redwoods and rivers and ocean and birds and deer and bear. And this whole place nourishes and feeds us every single day in our work at the 7th Generation Fund. Our purpose, our role, and our responsibility in our work is to support the good that's happening in communities, to support our peoples, our women, our girls throughout the Indigenous world, to mobilize the positive energy through our strategies of grant making, capacity building, movement building, creativity, visioning, hope, leadership. And we help to resource that to support grassroots first responders, all of the new Songs Rising people who are in action, who are working to heal, revitalize, and restore our thriving for their peoples, cultures, homelands, and to secure the sacred birthright of the 7th Generation Fund to come. I'm happy to greet you all today for this very special celebration of New Songs Rising. It's been a really powerful and dynamic partnership with Grantmakers for Girls of Color. It's a cherished aspect of 7th Generation Fund's Thriving Women program. Thank you for being here. I thank all of you who are on the front lines of heart and spirit, all of you who are creating and moving powerful work forward that honors your ancestors and thinks of those generations coming, those yet unborn, that supports our peoples today and tomorrow and looks forward, so we can establish a more just and balanced world, really to reclaim it. Deep appreciation to all who have been aligned collaborators for Indigenous peoples when we first thought of this collaboration and this partnership. And big heart shake, as Helene said, to G4GC for this sisterhood of, of movement building, of moving resources, of loving our Indigenous women and girls. So Eloqua, I'm pleased to turn to Alex Gonzalez, team member, program coordinator of Thriving Women for 7th Generation Fund, and Rana Lapine from our sister grantmaker organization, Grantmakers for Girls of Color. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia. Hi, everyone. As Tia mentioned, my name is Rana Lapine, and I'm the fund manager for the New Songs Rising initiative with Grantmakers for Girls of Color. This month marks 1 year since we launched the fund. I'm so grateful to everyone on this webinar, from the phenomenal panel of grantees to Alex, whose leadership in this work has been indispensable, to Tia, whose wisdom has shaped so much of Indian country's relationship with philanthropy, and Helene for her beautiful welcome, Nefertiti for the closing that will come, our Vice President Maheen for the words that she will speak, and of course, to everyone who has logged in and taken time to pause despite the world going on around us. Thank you for joining us. New Songs formally began in July of 2021. It was very important to us that we launch our programming with clear intentionality around funding to begin relationships with Indigenous communities. So often, philanthropy takes too long talking and not enough time actually funding. So we began our work with 8 grants. 4 were funded directly through G4GC, totaling $240,000 and stretching across 3 states and a variety of Indigenous communities. In addition, we granted funding for the 7th Generation Fund to grant another 4 grants, totaling $140,000. This partnership with 7th Generation Fund is inseparable from our work, and we work together to manage this fund. I do want to state that before the formal beginnings of the New Song Rising Initiative, G4GC was still funding Indigenous communities within our other funds, and there is still work that is housed and living across all of our funds, which directly works with Indigenous people. We have been blessed with Tia's leadership and counsel on our advisory board since our early days, and she has been monumental in building out the New Songs Rising Initiative and its essential partnership with the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous people. In the last year, we've begun forming relationships as a place to start before young people shape our structures. Thus far, we have granted over $1 million in funding to 17 grantees. These grantees represent at least 8 Indigenous communities and diasporas, and 9 serve intertribal communities separately from those 8. They are spread across 12 states and 1 US territory. All of those grants have been general operating support. We've also mobilized to support project grants whenever needed. An example of this would be the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Relative grants that were issued in May in support of the work done to respond to and observe the National Day of Action for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. If you want to learn more about what those grants look like, I encourage you to reach out, and I can send you a write-up that detailed that in a former newsletter. The most important aspect of our work in New Songs is the reciprocal nature of our relationships. We have begun working with grantees to see how we can best show up and use our position as a funder to benefit beyond just grants. One way this has emerged is in quarterly grantee calls, which were directly requested by grantees. The first call took place in June, and we're excited to see how these serve as a conduit to community building across diasporas. But today isn't just about celebrating what we've learned so far. We're also celebrating all that is to come, and I'm excited to make a few announcements about the future of New Songs. First, I'm thrilled to announce that we're in the process of finalizing the support of 12 new grantees. These grantees are rooted in 6 different Indigenous communities across 12 states, and another 6 serve intertribal populations. Grants will again be general operating support and will total over $510,000 in new awards. We will celebrate these new partnerships publicly soon, so be on the lookout for that information as soon as it's available. In addition to moving dollars, we're working hard to build out our structures. Like everything at G4GC, it is essential that our processes and strategies be determined and accountable to young people. To do this, we're meeting directly with Indigenous girls, femmes, Two-Spirit, and gender-expansive young people to hold a series of listening circles in which we hear directly from them, determining what they want and need from us. These listening circles will be facilitated by 2 brilliant young Native women, and we will share out our findings when they're completed. We are also inviting the relatives and community members of participants to join us for intergenerational learning about the same topics. Finally, we will continue meeting with existing grantees to hear how we can better show up and support Indigenous girls, Two-Spirit, and gender-expansive young people in their communities. I'm tremendously grateful to be a part of this work, and I'm excited to continue updating all as we have further news to share. I'm going to hand it over to Alex Gonzalez, who leads the Thriving Women programming with 7th Generation Fund. Too much coffee. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Rana. Greetings, relatives. Thank you all so much for attending this celebration in honor of the 1-year anniversary of the New Songs Rising Initiative. We're so excited to be joined by leadership of the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples and grant makers for Girls of Color, as well as an amazing panel of grantee partners representing the unique experiences and diverse contributions of New Songs Rising. My name is Alex Gonzalez. I am Pawnee and Chicana and calling in from Wiyot Homelands in Northern California. I serve as the program coordinator for Thriving Women at the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. Thriving Women is one of our 4 dynamic programs providing re-granting technical assistance and convening to Indigenous women-led and serving community-based organizations and projects throughout the Indigenous world. Thriving Women was first established in 2015 with the support of initiating donor Amanda Kostler. This program recognizes Indigenous women and girls' strength and capacity for healing, leadership, and restoring positive futures. Thriving Women centers traditional matrilineal lifeways that have sustained nations since time immemorial. While the majority of Thriving Women grants have been throughout Turtle Island, we have also supported Indigenous women-led organizations in Uganda, Kenya, India, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Ecuador, and Greenland. Over 300 Indigenous communities and tribal nations throughout 5 continents have been served through Thriving Women. Since July of 2021, approximately $2.3 million has been awarded in re-grants, including through the 7th Generation Fund's first ever multi-year grant awards. The program is implemented through 4 distinct pathways for the empowerment of Indigenous women, girls, families, and nations. Birthkeeping, motherhood, and kinship amplifies Native women as community builders, midwives, and mothers, and uplifts traditional birthkeeping, reproductive, and sexual health. Honoring the rights of Mother Earth recognizes that violence perpetrated upon the land echoes in the bodies of Indigenous women and girls, and centers a gender framework for social and ecological justice. This program pathway is newly established and was done so to recognize the many Thriving Women proposals we had received from women directly on the front lines of protecting sacred sites and homelands from extractive industries and man camps. Women and girls' cultural vitality and leadership supports the exchange of intergenerational knowledge through language revitalization, coming-of-age ceremonies, traditional food systems, and Indigenous concepts of gender expression and family wellness. Lastly, reclaiming a world without violence against women, girls, and two-spirit relatives rebuilds culturally relevant remedies which prevent, respond to, and heal from trauma and gender-based violence for a peaceful and safer world. An estimated 46% of Thriving Women grant awards have supported this pathway in the last year, which tells us that violence is and continues to be a major concern within our communities. In response to what we heard from community partners, Thriving Women also awarded 11 additional mini grants for the purpose of amplifying May 5th Day of Action events of current grantees. This unique funding opportunity was strategically mobilized to projects located in cities or states with statistically higher rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Within the last year, approximately 60% of organizations funded through Thriving Women have been led by and/or serving youth. This shows us that those often at the forefronts of movements for climate justice, gender justice, and re-indigenization are young people who will ultimately be impacted most as the next generation. Through the New Songs Rising initiative, Thriving Women has committed to mobilizing funding to projects directly serving young Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit youth. Examples of some of these incredible projects encompass multi-generational mentorship and peer learning opportunities, revitalizing coming-of-age ceremonies, language, and food sovereignty initiatives, providing access to comprehensive sexual education, consent advocacy, moon knowledge and support, and awareness of bodily autonomy, advancing gender issue advocacy, protecting sacred sites, and addressing impacts of resource extraction and climate change. We're joined by a panel of just a few of the amazing grantee partners of the New Songs Rising initiative. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing about your important work. To begin our discussion, we will go ahead and start with introductions. And Dr. Sanchez, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Samu, everyone. Na Ankawe Okua Pepovi, na Pohoge Oinge Iwidiomu. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Corinne Sanchez. I am on the homelands of the Tewa people, coming to you from northern New Mexico. And I'm just honored to be here representing Tewa Women United in this one-year anniversary of the New Songs Initiative and this wonderful panel. Thank you, Helene, for that one heartwarming welcome. And Tia, Alex, and Rana for this invitation to be here with you today. I am so blessed to be among this panelist of women that I admire, programming that I admire, in all levels of what you shared earlier in the invitations and introductions of the 7th Generation Fund and the Grantmakers for Girls of Color. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to ask Tammy if she can give an introduction to herself and her work.
Hello and good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever it is that you are. I always forget that we are, calling in from around the country, which is really exciting. Thank you so much for all the sisters who have helped to open this beautiful virtual gathering for all of us here today. My name is Tammy, showing pronouns she, hers, and I am calling in from the Hmong American Women's Association located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are one of the oldest Hmong women's organization in the country. And I believe we are one of the only ones left here in the US, but really proud to be and have been serving in this as an organization, just been serving the Milwaukee community for over 25 years, pushing close to 30 years now. And so I'm just really happy to come here and to also join an amazing panel, and looking forward to our discussion as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to ask if Autumn can present.
Hami Takayapi, Diane Wachiankapi, Chante Washte Nape Chisapi, Chto Adamaides Amachiapi, Na Lako, Itaje Wambli Ohikawi, Wazi Ahaha, Emataha. Hello, it's good to see everyone here. My name is Autumn White Eyes. My Lakota name is Wambli Ohitikawi. I'm from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and originally from the Pine Ridge community. And I greet you with a heartfelt handshake. I am the Associate Director of Youth Development at First Peoples Fund, and lead a couple of initiatives around spoken word poetry and arts with young people in the Pine Ridge Reservation area, as well as the Rapid City area. About 75% of our young people are gender expansive or gender non-conforming young people. And then the other 25% are mostly girls, but we also have a couple of boys in our program as well. And so we do a lot of different workshops and art workshops that connect to our oral traditions as Lakota people, and also connect to wider issues of the social political phenomena, including topics like murdered and missing Indigenous women and relatives, as well as extractive large companies and extractive industries on the earth as well. And so that's a little bit about our program and the work that we do. And I'm really excited to be here with you all to share more about our work.
Thank you. And then finally, Judy, do you mind giving an introduction?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, first off, and I'm talking to you from the homelands, the Winooski people, Winooski Abenaki. And I was on the board of directors for Gedekna for 16 years and then became the executive director 5 years ago. And our goal is multicultural, multi-generational, and we work throughout New England with women and their families to help them self-determine a good path in life. A lot of what we do is around reclaiming language, reclaiming work around agriculture, around gardens, pest control, indigenous pest control, and companion growing, and all this different kind of skills that our ancestors once knew. We have seed saving programs in parts of our territory that then we save the heirloom seeds for other groups to grow food for their communities. We work with our youth and our women to teach them how to dehydrate, how to can, how to freeze, how to preserve all this food that they get. And we have braiding sweetgrass groups, which are groups of women and youth where they work on culture, music and songs and beading and basketry, and they meet on a regular basis to gather. In a couple of places, we now have facilities where we can teach the youth how to cook healthy meals and then sit for hours and bead or make a basket. So that's a lot of what we do. I encourage a lot of our women to have their voices heard, to be on their school boards, to be on committees around climate change, around land acknowledgements, all of these different things, mascot issues. And so we gather once a week to discuss these issues and share with the other groups throughout New England what we're doing, what we're working on, what works, what doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I'm just going to take a second to make sure everyone can see all of our wonderful panelists. Give me one moment, please. Actually, while we do that, I might ask if Alex would like to get started with our first question.
Thank you, Rana. Our first question for the panelists is, how has access to coming of age work changed within your lifetime? So whoever may like to share first may go ahead and unmute themselves.
So I can share a little bit. So in many of our Pueblo communities, we still have coming of age ceremonies or processes for young men, but have lost these ceremonies and processes for young women. But there's been a revitalization and a reclaiming that is happening. And I just want to say, I believe that one of the powers that we possess as human beings is our ability to create and recreate ritual and practices. And I'm overjoyed to see families and communities doing this. Tewa Women United has done this in different ways. We've revitalized some moon ceremonies. We've had some coming of age ceremonies. And again, these were lost as genocide and colonial practices were happening, and people in our communities were murdered with that information, right? Our healers, our midwives, our elders. And so again, the power that we have to recreate, reclaim, and pray into being these processes again, it's really beautiful to see. So that's, thank you.
I could share next a little bit. So when I think about like the needs of young people and how they've changed over the years, I often think about what my own experience was as a young person and what were the things I needed, but then also how that has changed and what are the needs of the young people now. So I was a young person actually in our poetry program when it was first starting out. And when I think back to when I was a young person, I feel like it was really, we were really being ignited to learn about social justice issues And however, with this new generation of young people, they're so aware and so understanding of so many social justice issues and so many issues that are impacting them that I don't know if my generation was. And one of that being very well versed in decolonization and understanding the long-term effects of colonization on our young people and our communities. And so one of the things that I've really seen from the group of young people that I've gotten to work with over the last few years is this awareness and this confidence of just reclaiming those coming of age times and ceremonies to understand how important they are and wanting to be a part of those ceremonies. And so we had a young person who was a part of an alumni in our program who took initiative to want to create a Two-Spirit coming of age camp with us. And so last summer we got to put on a Two-Spirit camp for the young people to create their own ribbon skirts and dresses and to create their own regalia and to put in the work that goes into what a coming of age ceremony, all of the prep work that goes into this beautiful moment of as you're coming of age. And so that's one of the things that I think really gives me hope, but one of the things that I'm noticing about how things are changing.
Yeah, and I can share a little bit about how the coming of age work has changed in our lifetime. I think one of the things that we have been reclaiming, especially here with our work with Hmong girls, is reclaiming the fact that we are actually not represented in our history, right? And so what we have done here at HAWA is we've actually taken back history, and we've actually been able to really craft and create a her story timeline, because we actually need to be able to see ourselves and our mothers and our aunties and our grandmothers in a reflection of our own history and how we actually came into being. And so at the very forefront of the work that we've been able to do, even with Hmong girls here, is really having them craft that out themselves in terms of, how do we write and make sure that we include the histories of our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunties and everybody else that has come through, to really make sure that we understand the full breadth of what it is and where it is that we come from, right? And so that has been a huge identity building piece for the work that we have been doing with Hmong girls here. The other thing that have been kind of birthed out of helping to co-create this Hmong women's timeline is also helping to create and craft Hmong queer and trans timeline as well, and being able to continuously look at the timeline and making sure that we are like cultivating our own narratives and cultivating our own history. And so I feel like that has been really beautiful. And I really wish that even as a young person within this organization, that I would have had that for myself. And so we're really trying to create things that we think are important to our young girls. But then what we have seen through being able to share this and also co-create this with our Hmong girls is like, for the first time, they actually really see themselves as well, which is really beautiful to see.
I don't mind going next. Thank you. So I have a few years on you ladies. So my lifetime is a little bit different. My family was the largest family targeted in the Vermont Eugenics Survey. 623 people were institutionalized, many were sterilized. So I grew up in an environment with what is talked about this house stays in this house. And I grew up in an environment where you hid your identity. And so what has changed is I am now helping these women and their youth find their voice, speak up at school events against the mascots, educate them as much as we can about the history that's not been told and how that trauma has impacted their families. some of our people on school boards to represent their communities. I personally am on the state of Vermont's Climate Council, Ag and Eco Subcommittee, Biomass Committee, and Life Cycle Analysis Committee to fight to include traditional knowledges in climate change and the new policies to put forward. So the change is in my life has been drastic as far as finding your voice and sharing your voice and allowing your voice to be heard. So that's the biggest change for me.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. There's so much power in the answers you've all given, and it's only the first question. So this is just phenomenal. I am going to ask another question of everyone, and we can just keep that same order. I want to know what you all need. So either from your community, from funders, from the young people who participate, from really anyone, what do you need at this time to support your work?
We need so much love and so much commitment from all of you. We need so many resources. Really to believe wholeheartedly that our Indigenous nations hold the knowledge, right? We are the experts in our experience. We are the experts in the solutions that are to drive our work, that we are committed wholeheartedly to our communities. From funders, we need to be resourced. We need to be heavily resourced. Less than 1% of philanthropic money comes to Indigenous communities and in Indigenous organizations. We uplift Seventh Generation and Grantmakers for Girls of Color around general support. This is what our communities need. What we've been asking for is multi-year funding, right? The transformations and the healing that we want to see in our community aren't going to happen in one year or 2 year spans. It takes a deep investment to see those transformations, and these women and these organizations are committed to that. And from our communities, we just need us to believe in ourselves, right? That we hold the power to make the change, that we are the change makers, but that we have intergenerational wisdom, to come and support and to protect our Mother Earth. And so I think these are just a few of the things that we need. I think there's a lot. I'm just grateful for the foundations and the peoples that have given their heart and soul to help us through. We're 33 some years old, right? That's kind of unheard of in organizations for Indigenous communities. Even though we have a long history, we definitely need to see ongoing and growing support. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree just wholeheartedly with everything Corinne said. And I think, with funders having just an understanding of the needs of Native communities without it becoming some kind of poverty show for them, right? Just being able to know colonialism has affected us, its long-term effects, it's trauma, and that's going to affect the mental health of young people, and those are the needs of young people too. And so how can you bring in this relational support in a way that keeps our dignity and keeps us in relationship with one another, so that we can have those long-term impacts that we want to see for our communities? I think that is something that is really important to me to share, and that we, because I feel that the young people are always going to speak out, and we are going to provide that support and that space, and our community is yearning for that communal space, especially after COVID, especially after wake of COVID. How do we continue to share in community in a safe way that's going to support the longevity of our communities whenever we have faced so much in our histories?
Yeah, I echo everything that Dr. Karine and Autumn have shared with us already today. I think the only thing that I really want to just add is that, especially for our young people, what we really need from our young people is um, for them to just continue dreaming, right? And being innovative, you know, and realizing that we actually really need their leadership. We really, really do need their leadership. And if our communities are going to thrive, it's going to thrive because we have the leadership of young people, right? And so I think that that's just something that I truly, wholeheartedly, really believe in.
Yeah, and I agree, of course, with what everybody said as well. I guess if I would say anything, it would be 3 words: collaborations and connections. I'm always looking for collaborations. I'm always looking for connections that help us to think with one mind and one heart, right? And then the third one is equity. Working in policies around climate change, there's this huge inequity of how people want to move forward. They want everyone to have a solar panel, everyone to have an electric car. And here in the Northeast, to have our electric grid is so inadequate to meet those needs. We have to take an additional 1.2 million acres from the Indigenous people in Canada. And we've already taken 3.8 million and relocated 11 nations. So there is no equity in moving forward in that way. And that I would love help in that area, getting the word out that we need to think differently. We need to add traditional knowledges to how we look at climate change. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Our next question, we're going to share a short video. This is from Wingspan Media and features Star Green Sky, Oglala, and Anishinaabe. She's a young woman who I work with on the Eagle Feather Fellowship for Thriving Women, a special mentorship program for young Indigenous women interested in grassroots organizing and planning their own Thriving Women projects. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we'll have a question in response to the video.
The pathway towards planetary wellness, or a shift in what we're seeing with climate change, really starts with returning the land back to Indigenous people. With that also comes who we are as Indigenous people, returning to that. With that comes everything else, such as our own individual methods of wellness and our traditional ways of healing ourselves would also come with being able to connect to the land. Any climate change discussion, any climate change activism movement is not complete without Indigenous voices and Indigenous ways of knowing. Bring Indigenous issues to the forefront. Think about our youth, think about our future, think about our communities as a whole. You can look at the desecration of land, desecration of resources as a metaphor for also the desecration of Indigenous women and girls and their own bodies. The issues of climate change, the issues of resource extraction and exploitation, missing and murdered Indigenous women and young girls and people, they're connected in a lot of different ways. When you look at the overarching structures of colonialism, of colonization, Indigenous people, Indigenous bodies are seen as resources meant for extraction. So a lot of the time, when it comes to those resource extraction initiatives, also brings with it a population that puts our Indigenous women and girls in harm and commits violence against our Indigenous women and girls. What we're experiencing is a culmination of centuries of not healing. When we look at the history of colonization, we look at these larger systems, a large part of it is not healing the land, not healing after generations of trauma, generations of violence. There is a sudden movement for decolonization in terms of returning the land and land stewardship rights to Indigenous people. Those are the first steps in regaining that healing and starting that healing process.
So our question in response to this short video, Star is an example of a young Indigenous woman creating change in her community, and much of her work revolves around the relationship between Mother Earth and Indigenous women and girls. So how do you see this relationship in your own communities, and how are girls and gender expansive youth shaping it?
Wow, that was a powerful testament to the wisdom and power of our young people. Star was amazing. I want to say that Te Women United's foundation of our work is environmental justice. We were established in the early 1980s. We know the 1990s were the framing of environmental justice by Black, Indigenous, people of color, women-led organizations, and disenfranchised communities. And we were present at many of those gatherings. My activism, or my youth activism, actually started in environmental justice around Los Alamos National Laboratory, nuclear defense research facility here in New Mexico, where the whole of the cycle of that war mentality lives, right? And we've been trying to gather and hold Los Alamos accountable around land, air, water contaminations. And so the elders that visioned our work and continue to give breath to it really understood that our culture is intricately tied to the environment and the health of our Mother Earth. And so we need to ensure her protection, right? And we also know that environmental justice and reproductive justice are braided together in so many ways that were mentioned and that were brought to light in that video. And so also that youth organizing is powerful, I want to say, right? From civil rights to environmental rights, nothing should be done without an intergenerational approach or lens. And that, again, our culture is our strength and our people are our strength. Our ancestors are our strength. So we got to continue to pray. We got to continue to ask for guidance and support. And we got to continue to take action. And I think that we are just continuing that vision and prayer of our ancestors, right? They were here protecting us, dreaming us, and hold and passed on the knowledge for us to continue. And so that needs to happen. And I'm just excited that they are continuing to do that with this youth organizing and youth activism and art through activism. I think all of it is super powerful and just totally amazed. And we see it in our community continuing on. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's such a beautiful video, and I think really highlighting also the parallels between the destruction of Mother Earth and how that is also, paralleled to the way that Indigenous women and relatives are being treated today, right, through missing and murdered Indigenous women, but also the legacy that has happened to our communities because of colonialism. And one of the things that I'm seeing in our own community is that oftentimes young Lakota women and Two-Spirit youth are usually at the center of activism and taking the lead in the front lines to issues that are impacting our communities the most, like the extractive industries and the legacy of the boarding schools of finding the young children's graves, right? That's happened across Indian country, but specifically in our community, looking at the ways that those institutions have affected our communities. And I see young women and Two-Spirit youth at the front of that work. When it comes to our work with First Peoples Fund and as the spoken word initiatives that we do with the young people, we see that a lot of the time there's a lot of self-empowerment and self-efficacy happening because they're writing about these issues that are impacting them the most and going out and performing, and that being a part of their activism as well as having that self-empowerment to go out into community and say, hey, this is not okay. And this needs to change. And I want to get on a platform and use my voice to create that change. And so we see such the power of art being so influential to us in all of the movements that our young people are now, taking the lead on, but also have continually impacted our community, whether it's, the American Indian movement and Wounded Knee to Standing Rock and all of those current issues that continue to happen in our communities. Our youth are talking about and using their artwork to speak out about issues that impact them the most. And I think following the lead of young people is really the most important, because when we think about the future of this earth, right, that they hold a lot of responsibility and also heaviness about what does it mean to inherit a world that they're going to live in that is facing so much climate change and destruction.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for those reflections. And I think one of the things that I'm thinking about with this question is this sense of, Hmong women and girls, and just as a group, never feeling like we have ever owned anything, right? And this constant search of belonging, right? Because we've always been uprooted and had to move somewhere else because of war, because of, everything that was, and colonialism and all of that, right? And so we constantly have been historically a group of people that have always sort of migrated and moved around. And there was never that sense of like feeling really connected to any specific place, right? And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is like in this search for really finding like a home, what does it actually mean? What does home actually mean? And what does belonging actually mean? And I think that so often that like Hmong girls that come into a space like Hawa are constantly in search of that, right? And so one of the things as, that has always been sort of like the thing that we had been thinking about in terms of our work with Hmong girls here is what would it actually mean for an organization like Hawa to be able to actually own their own space? Because in owning your own space and having agency over a physical space and really allowing our young girls to create the world that they actually want to see, right? And how can we actually like really move and champion that? And so I think that, having this conversation with you all and being on this panel, I'm sitting actually in our butterfly room, right? And this beautiful mural on the back is a testament, right, to our girls who are like, I want to be able to see myself and I want to be able to feel like I have ownership over something, right? And I think that in being able to provide this amazing space for our young people, it allows them to really see what happens when not only when Hmong women and girls like own something, but I'm hoping that that will translate to what does it mean as a Hmong girl to actually own and belong to yourself? Because so often from the minute that we're born, we're always pushed to say, to believe that we are as a person is not a full person and that we're actually going to eventually grow up to belong to somebody else. And so what does that actually mean to belong to us? And so we see, we see the relationship between what does it mean to actually own something and build a home on, but what does it actually mean for young girls to be able to build that with all of us, right? And build what they want to see in the world, and also build for something that they want to see for themselves too.
Thank you. That's awesome. So what my takeaway was from the movie was exactly what we're doing. We have a lot of educational components to our working day to help our youth and our women understand that we don't live in a world of silos. Others do, but we don't. We look at the whole, not the part. We look at the part and how it fits into the whole. And so we do a lot of education around that and how traditional knowledges will help us to look at everything as a whole. When you pull on something in nature, you find the rest of the world is connected. And we also we do a lot of planning in regards to the environment, how we can learn. We do a lot of the kids and women make movies on things, little, the little 2-minute clips, movies of things they've learned and things they've done and how they can share them with other groups. And so they're constantly learning from the other groups, and that helps them to, I think it helps them to see they're not alone. It helps them to develop a voice to speak out. And it helps them just to develop a good self-esteem. And I just feel good about that. I feel good that they all get in there and reclaim and work together to make things happen. We were fortunate enough to purchase a building in northern Maine last year. And the girls have done the planning for renovations. They've made a garage. They've worked on the roof. They've painted. They've scrubbed and cleaned. And now they've planned and are constantly working on their garden. And there's a person that lives next to us who is elderly and has moved out, and they've approached me to see if we can get that facility to make their gardens bigger. So a lot of our youth are understanding that connection with the environment and how they are what they eat. And that's why cooking is this house is so great, because we can teach them how to cook really amazing meals that they've grown the food for. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your thoughts and reflections. And it's such an honor to be in this space and in community with you all. Our next set of questions are going to be more specific to individual panelists. So I'll begin with a question for Dr. Sanchez. Describe the intersection of birth justice with the vitality of children, families, and the next generation of Indigenous girls.
Yeah, well, I think Star's video showed a lot of that connection, right? And just hearing Judy and Tammy and Autumn share the power and strength of women. And so when we started our organization, it was founded by Native women, led and created and dreamed and prayed and all of that by Indigenous women. And oftentimes we put ourselves last, right, in our families and our communities. And so part of the reality is that we need to focus some of that healing and energy, because if we're not well, our communities aren't well, our families aren't well. If our Mother Earth is not well, we're not well. There is that direct correlation of our Mother Earth is a reflection of us and us of her. And so again, when we think about that, we carry the seeds of our grandchildren. Like every girl, person with a uterus carries the seeds of their grandchildren. the responsibility for us to care for ourselves, what we consume, how we take care of, how we nurture, how we talk to ourselves, how we speak to ourselves, all of this is connected. We see from research on water by Dr. Emoto around the energy of water and the vibrations, and if our bodies are more than 80% water, we need to just be conscious of how we talk to ourselves and how others talk to us, right? And so I think this, we started our doula project, our Yia Vikegendi doula project, with the purpose of ending violence against women, girls, and Mother Earth. Our children are having violence directed at them from child sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, what they witness. We ran a sexual violence program for 20 some years. We're now doing prevention. And part of that piece is like, how do we get to that place of healthy sexuality if we're not talking about healthy sexuality? How do we get to that place of body sovereignty and national sovereignty, nation sovereignty if we're not talking about that openly? We're at this place of missing and murdered Indigenous women at such a high rates. If we're not looking at the violence and the ways that we've incorporated that internalized oppression, we need to talk about that. That's healing is so important. And so again, how reproductive justice and birth justice are incorporated. We have the boarding, as mentioned, the boarding school history. So children that were taken away, children that were murdered at the hands of religious organizations. There's a lot of healing that we need to do intergenerationally, individually, collectively. And we believe that as we heal ourselves, we heal our ancestors, and we transform the future of our children. And that's real, right? That's simultaneously happening. Prayer is powerful and action is powerful. So when we look at the work of our doula project, we're now training doulas in our indigenously crafted model. So we've trained over 200 some doulas in our community. We're looking at how, as women, the contaminations and the nutrients we take in, because of the differences in our physiology, our bodies absorb contaminants differently. So what may be out there and targeted in the environment may be more directed at women and children. And so we have this Protect Those Most Vulnerable campaign, which is directly tied to, again, our reproductive justice issues, our reproductive health. We as women, those with uteruses, birthing peoples, have a different physiology across our lifetime. We want to have health care and health access that recognizes that. And that's a direct tie to that reproductive justice, environmental justice, gender justice issues. So we look at this and think about that matrix of domination, and we can't do any one of these things that we want health in our community without all of these, taking into consideration the wholeness of being. And so just talking to the intersectionalities, we know that, again, we're committed to this work because, as Tia mentioned, those yet to come, right? We need to be conscious for those yet to come around how we're walking on this earth, how we're being with each other. And so again, the whole interconnection around the pushing against the domination, pushing against white supremacy, pushing against what other people tell us we should be or who we should be. And really, I love Tammy's place around just her story, right? Hearing those stories in our communities and creating those spaces that may not exist, but we know that they can exist and they can transform. And so I think that's a little bit of like how reproductive justice and all of these other issues are connected for us in this birth justice piece. We want to birth healthy communities. We want our children to grow up to be who they were meant to be, who they were dreamed to be, who they were prayed to be, strong, powerful beings. And we don't want outside gun violence and other things to take that away. We don't want outside institutions to take those away from us. And so we need to continue to raise our voices and be collectively in this together as community for the protection of our future. And that is reproductive health and reproductive justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Autumn, our next question is for you. How does participating in literary art and spoken word empower the leadership of girls, Two-Spirit, and gender expansive youth?
Yeah, I think I think I talked a little bit about this already, but I just wanted to highlight some things in our program that we do and some of the things that I've noticed with the young people. So in our program, we employ safer space keeping. And the reason we call it safer space keeping rather than just safe space keeping is that we're trying while we're in the space to keep it safe as much as we can. But we understand that violence against young people or women can always happen, and we can't fully shield those, but shield those things happening from young people. But while they're in space with us, that they're in a safe space where they can feel that they can come to us and that there's a trusted adult nearby and help them through their processing. And so much of what we write about and what we learn about can be really heavy things, right? We talk about the long-term effects of genocide and colonization and the harm of Native and Indigenous peoples. But what I've noticed with the young people is that sometimes, writing and learning about these things has also become a place of healing for them. And a place of safe, like processing in their healing of those things. And that they are becoming empowered through the things that they're writing, through the conversations that they're having, from speaking out about these issues and building upon their own activist identities as young people, is that we're seeing that healing happening and also that empowerment happening for them to then go on to the next level to become leaders in their community. And I've seen so many of them now, go on to become, take on leadership roles in the community and to speak out about those issues that are really impactful or really impacting our communities. When racism happens in our community, for example, we often, we'll have a talking circle about what was going on and how it's affecting us and what we would want to do and how we want to respond. And even just providing that space, I think, then provides that healing and that confidence to take on those leadership roles within community. And so, I just want to say that much, and that I believe so much in the power of young people, and that so for girls coming from Lakota culture, we really believe in the power of our matriarchs. And so seeing so many of the young people in our program are young women and Two-Spirit youth, them taking on those roles feels very connected to who we are as Lakota people and a reclamation of our traditions as well.
Thank you so much, Autumn. Our next question is for Tammy. How do you build sisterhood in a diasporic urban Indigenous community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think we always believe here at Ahawa that our connection to our identities is actually connected to each other as sisters. And when we can see our sisters, we can see ourselves, right? And so we're guided by this belief that we actually need to create and cultivate safe spaces in our communities for us to be able to build relationships with each other as sisters, right? And we use the word sisters as a way to really make sure that regardless of which clan folks are from, that we are still connected in one way, shape, or form, right, as a people. And so utilizing the Hmong tradition of, keeping our oral traditions and really sharing our lessons and sharing the things that are really hard for us to be experiencing in real time, right? And really sharing all of our hardships through the element of story sharing, right? And sharing our stories in that way. Because story sharing for us culturally was a way that we actually were able to gain knowledge, right? And we were able to understand our customs and our traditions, right? And so so for us here at HAWA, it was really about how do we create these spaces for our young girls to be able to be in community with each other. I realized that we are actually all connected, right? And like we said, some of the programs that we have here has the element of story sharing, and in everything that we do, even with our women's group, there's always the element of story sharing, right? Because we may not be able to name the thing that we are experiencing, but we can share the thing that we are experiencing, right? And so we're trying to make it accessible for our young people to really be able to share the things that they're experiencing. And so we have a couple of really amazing programs here that helps to cultivate the safe space of building sisterhood. And so we have our, Our Sister Stories program, right? That's really about bringing homegirls together, connecting and finding connection with one another through our experiences, right? And the things that we're going through, right? And really using that as a way to build community and build support and to build love, right? And in a lot of these spaces, it's also about learning some of our cultural arts too, right? And bringing in like cultural arts as a way to like find connection, and weave in storytelling as a way to be able to do that, right? And so, yeah, just continuing to cultivate safe spaces for young girls to be able to really come in, feel safe, and really be able to be themselves.
Thank you so much for that. Judy, our last individual question is for you. How does Gadakina support and build community with Native people both within the reservation and beyond?
One of the issues that is common throughout New England is our kids are often bullied in schools. Sometimes it's off reservation, sometimes it's on reservation, because we don't always have Indigenous teachers on our reservations. So one of the things we do is we read newspapers, watch the news, we look for schools within New England that have mascots, schools that have racial issues. And throughout the year, we review the newest children's literature. And we have a program called the One Shelf Project. And in that One Shelf Project, we have about 50 books that we give to a school to help our children. For the latest research shows that the further you are from knowing Native people, the more apt you are to not understand, to see kids bullying, and to have a mascot. So we give these books to institutions on reservation and in the communities our children are in to help those communities understand our stories, our way of life, and the way we look at things. It's really, we started the program 3 years ago. It was really popular. People wanted to get on a waiting list, and we were like, well, wait a minute, we're looking for schools that have troubles. It's not like there's a waiting list. And then the second year, we got a Solidarity Book Award from Amherst College for the program. It was such a success. So we were fortunate enough to get funding again to do it this year. This is our third year. And it seems so helpful for kids to look at books and see themselves in their books and be able to go to the library and get a book with their face in the book. And for teachers to have the resource that they need, that they can rely on and not have to worry, do I have to figure out if this is a good book or a bad book? And so we're really proud of that program and looking forward to doing it again this year.
Thank you all so much for your beautiful and empowering reflections on this. We did have one more video from the 7th Generation Fund that we wanted to show. However, we are running a little bit behind schedule. However, if you are interested in viewing more perspective pieces from Thriving Women grantees and partners of the 7th Generation Fund, please feel free to go to our Instagram, 7gen Fund.
Thank you, Alex. So although we're not watching that video, I do want to make sure that we still have time for that closing question for everyone, which is tied to a video in which a Native scholar talks about the future. And so our final question for everyone is just quite simply, what does the future look like for Indigenous girls and Two-Spirit youth leadership?
The future looks bright. Woo! Amazing work, amazing hearts out there. It looks super bright. Don't give up, always move forward.
I think it looks really hopeful and powerful, and I'm so excited to follow the lead of Indigenous young people, women, Two-Spirit, and genderqueer youth. Oh, you're on mute, Tammy.
Oh, dang, I was hoping to get through at least without being, but I was just gonna, yeah, I totally agree. Super bright. Our young people are gonna really surprise us and come through. And you know, I think that there's some things that we've seen, but there's a lot that's also unforeseen that's really exciting too. And so I think that I am also waiting to be so incredibly surprised too by the leadership of our young people.
And I'm feeling equally good that the future will bring us amazing, strong women who have found a strong voice.
Nyawa Goa, thank you all so much. This has been incredible. I wish we could have this panel go for hours. Honestly, it is just phenomenal to hear from you all. I cannot thank you enough for your time today and also for just the incredible work you're doing with young people in your community. I have seen this note here to share the video. I will share it in the chat with everyone shortly. But first, I want to introduce our Vice President at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, Maheen Kaleem. She is phenomenal and has really been an incredible leader in this space. So Maheen, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the incredible power and wisdom that each of you brought to this space, which is reflective and just like a tiny little window into all of the beautiful and important work that you do every day. We are so incredibly grateful at Grantmakers for Girls of Color. So I want to be respectful of time and make sure that we have ample time for our important closing. But I do want to share a few words, which are outside of my deep gratitude to each of the panelists, to the young people that you support every day, to the young people that you were, which so many of you brought into the space. And especially to Alex, Tia, and the rest of the team at the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. The New Songs Rising initiative is really something that was born out of sisterhood. It was born out of love, as Tia said, a deep love for Indigenous girls, young women, and Two-Spirit youth, and trust. And at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, our mission is broadly to resource transformative organizing work that is led by young people, particularly girls, femmes, and gender expansive and Two-Spirit young youth of color more broadly. But Tia is one of our incredible board members, and the origin story of this initiative, as Rana shared, it started in conversations. It started in us being in very intentional dialogue about what it would mean for a non-Native, non-Indigenous led organization to partner with 7th Generation, who has been a leader in this space, to really be in right relationship with Indigenous communities. And so we took our time, we waited, we're grateful that Rana gave us the privilege of joining us, and Alex came on to really start to craft this initiative with each of you. But I do want to name that so much of what we think about in our work broadly at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, affectionately known as G4GC, and within the New Songs Rising initiative, which is truly a partnership, which is not common in philanthropy. You don't see funder intermediaries partnering in this way, for all the reasons that you all named around colonization and the way that it puts us in conflict with one another or tries to. And so I would just say that, like, all of the work that you all are naming, all of the work that we see supporting, Tia brought in that this is really about movement building. It is active resistance to those systems of oppression, particularly those in philanthropy as an institution. We are really, really committed to resourcing all the things that each of you has named, which are really about going back to ancestral practices of how we love and care for our communities, that this is actually philanthropy. And actually that, a lot of times people ask the question like, well, where's the evidence base? And for us, it's like, well, as Tia mentioned, Indigenous peoples have been surviving and fighting a battle for resistance and survival for 530 years. That survival is all the evidence that we need. And the acts of supporting and moving in deep deference and partnership with young people and really leaning into the ways of knowing, the ways that many communities see young people as more proximate to what is sacred and what is wise is actually why we feel like this initiative is so integral to any effort to achieve justice and equity. I will say that, some of the things that you all mentioned, Tammy, you talked about like, what does it mean for young people to belong to us, for them to feel like we belong to them? I heard themes around this work, particularly around supporting girls and Two-Spirit youth as being a part of this larger movement to reclaim, to restore, to remember. And I think about the video as such a beautiful example of what it means when young people can reclaim in ways that make sense to them, to preserve and to move forward and to advance. And so what I think that means for, I guess I will just offer, I could talk about the beauty that this partnership has been already for a long time, but there are two things that I think are important to share with this community. First of all is, unlike a lot of our other initiatives, it's been really internally facing. We felt like we needed to build relationship with each other as two organizations, Seventh Generation and G4GC, and then with each of you. So, you won't see the same kind of big media splashes, and it's not because we aren't so committed to ensuring that other funders are resourcing this work. It is because we want to listen first, and we want to talk to young people first. And as Rana said, we want to be in co-construction and really follow the models that each of you has set forward in terms of what it means to actually be in truly authentic, respectful relationship with young people and the wisdoms they carry, which is really different than, oh, okay, we're just going to throw some young people on a panel and ask them to share what their immediate wisdoms for the moment are. No, like, this is part of movement building, as Tia said, for us. And I guess what I would say to my fellow colleagues in philanthropy and funders is to revisit this conversation because it is so rich. But the specific calls I heard are around the need for long-term general support because of the emergence. A lot of you talked about all of the ways of knowing that we already have and all of the ways of knowing that young people are going to bring to us. And if organizations don't have the capacity or the space to pivot, to respond, to honor that space for emergence, then this work can't continue in the ways that it needs to. The second piece is around respecting leadership. And I was in dialogue with some people yesterday around some of these topics. And I think part of it is around trusting communities and really trusting and being okay with what we don't know, that actually, we have a lot of different initiatives at G4GC, and we see them all as talking to each other and learning from each other and entering with the respect and the humility to be able to name what we don't know and use that as an opportunity for learning, as opposed to needing to know and then funding. But instead, just move the money, I guess is what I would say. Move the money, and then you'll know, and then you'll learn all the things, because you'll get to be in relationship with the incredible grantees like the ones we just heard of, to be able to tell us all the things we don't know, and to be in a space of deep learning and shifting. And then the last two things I'll say are, defer to the leadership of Indigenous funders and leaders. For us, Seventh Generation has been deeply generous in saying we are actually going to bring you along on this journey and teach you how to be in relationship with the communities we're in relationship with, and work with you to think about what co-construction and listening looks like. Because for us, ceding power is ultimately the goal. We envision this initiative as one where the communities, young people are actually determining not only what is funded, but also how we fund and who we fund. And that is something that we will be engaging and listening along for the rest of the year. And then the last thing I'll say are that if we are interested in combating exploitation, it's really important for philanthropy to think about the ways that we participate in the extraction that, as Star Green Sky actually said, actually lives out in the bodies of women and girls and Two-Spirit young people. And so for us, I can't articulate in any other way why it is so critical for our own institutions to really interrogate our participation in extraction and exploitation, and the very tangible ways that that plays out in terms of resulting in violence in communities. And that is actually really important, that we correct our course and right those harms in ways that make sense. And so I would my call to action is reach out to us, learn more about these grantees, resource our grantees, resource Seventh Generation. And if you don't know kind of where to begin when it comes to resourcing Indigenous girls and women, that is why this initiative exists. We are more than happy to engage with fellow funder colleagues to really mobilize resources together, because again, this is, I think each of the panelists, but I heard Tammy Corinne and Judy all say that this work is, and Autumn, I think too, that this work is relational. And so we want to approach this in a relational way. So just deep, deep, deep gratitude and to each of you and onward, because we will continue to do this work. It deserves to be resourced, and we will be here to do it alongside you.
Thank you so much, Maheen. Finally, I'm going to pass it over to Nefertiti Jet, who is the board clerk for one of the grantees that we will be partnering with as one of those 12 that I mentioned that will be new. That is the Northeast Network of Kinship and Healing. I will pass it to Nefertiti to close us. Thank you so much.
Katapatas, Rana. Couldn't just say a sweet short prayer. I just want to say really honored and humbled to have been here with you all. And my prayer is Numanatuman, Katapatas Wachiwami, Numasanuak, Wani, Natakwas Manish, Wanawami, Jakwasanis. And our Creator, I thank you for all the people here. I thank you for all our lands. And I thank you for all the things that you provide for us and to us. And I know we're running short in time, but if I could just ask everyone to take a deep breath in and exhale that and realize that we are the continued breaths of our grandmothers. And I thank everyone here for all the work. I want to celebrate and rejoice in your 1-year anniversary. And I thank everyone here for their time. Katapata.
Nyala, thank you so much. I am so grateful for all of you for your time today. I want to thank Alex again for her incredible leadership in planning this. And Alex, I welcome you if you want to add anything. But otherwise, I just want to again thank our phenomenal panelists and speakers from our opening to our closing, to Tia and Maheen and everyone in between. It was a beautiful day. I see some folks have their hands up. If you don't mind putting a question in the Q&A, I will reach out. This webinar has been recorded and we will share it out with everyone as soon as it's available. Thank you all so much for taking the time today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your summer. Alex, I'll pause in case you'd like to add anything.
Thank you all so much for celebrating this beautiful partnership with us and the 1-year anniversary. It's truly an honor.
Thank you.